public good, I
Yeah,
am so
that's
on
great.
board for.
That's what we think. Yes.
We gotta have you moderate
This
at
should be
some
a public
point.
good.
Yeah, at some point in the future, Snacks, you should definitely moderate. I want to also welcome Simona, since Simona's here. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Great to
Awesome.
be here, everybody.
Yeah,
Does any-
Simona. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, just like, does anyone else like it's their first time here want to intro quickly, like, and no pressure, but just want to give that space since I was like Snack should intro. If not, yeah, we can dive straight in.
Yeah, well, I just want to say, like, for those who are like super new to the space, so I noticed, like, Colton, Bianca, like Snacks, Mercer, like, and Sarah. That's who I noticed are like pretty new to the space. Would love you guys, like, if you guys can introduce yourself, if you guys feel like, if you guys prefer. There's also like the channel where you can pretty much a public goods library channel. You can also introduce yourself there. But yeah, so also if you're new, feel free to speak up because we like pretty much what this just kind of give you guys a context. This like meeting is pretty much just kind of like a fun discussion relating to public goods and Web3 with really smart people. Sometimes I can't keep up. Actually, I don't think I ever keep up at all. But anyway, so yeah, if you guys can like kind of introduce yourself, that'd be awesome. Maybe.
Yeah,
Sarah?
sure.
Wait, who spoke up? Actually, I have no idea.
I
Colton.
can do a quick
Awesome.
introduction. Like
Colton did.
pass it off. So I'm Colton. I've been working with Kevin Iwaki on the Greatest LARP. So I do a lot of NFT art, and yeah, we've got a lot of cool stuff coming up that we'll be posting in the general channel if you guys want to check it out. So I'm here for the great discussion. I'm glad to see Pizza DAO coming up. That's a great one. Yeah, can't wait to hear everybody else's introductions.
Awesome, excited, Colton. I see Sarah earlier. Sarah, you here?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm quite new to this space. Thank you so much for giving me the space to speak up too. I had a meeting with Scott 2 weeks ago, I think, because I wanted to get more involved in Gitcoin DAO. I work currently in the public policy space, but more in the traditional field, so to say, and I really align myself with the principles of Gitcoin, and hence the interest of getting more involved and see how I can contribute. Thank you.
Excited to have you. Really glad to have not necessarily Web3 minded people who already have a background in the space who are showing up. So that's great. I'm glad to have you here.
I may work at Gitcoin, but I still don't have a background in Web3, so we're all good. So I am the most like non-technical one here. I have no understanding. I don't know why I'm here, but I am here. So, Bianca, are you here?
Hello. I'm Bianca. I am a designer, educator, and writer currently exploring Web3. I was thankfully a KB4 fellow, which helped jumpstart that journey. And now I'm trying to get my feet even more wet by contributing to various DAOs and even writing essays about the space. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so happy that you're at KB4. Like we literally by accident. I don't know if the kernel people just did it on purpose, but like we have a bunch of KB4 folks in the library. I don't know why. Like for example, here we have Sid. She's also in the. I'm sure that there's more, and I'm totally missing people, but we have a ton of KB4 folks. So feel free to bring in like kernel folks over because for some reason we have really good experience with kernel folks. But maybe I'm just biased because I'm also in kernel 4. Anyway, so I see Gamma's here. If you guys want to introduce yourself too.
Yeah, why not? So I'm Gamma, like a musician and communications person. I've been contributed to Prime DAO and the Daoist, which is also an event, cultural DAO space. And well, like I joined DAOs like earlier in the year, like January or so, and this grew so much in my life. I become so excited about the whole space and everything. So yeah, looking forward to this meeting.
Glad to have you here.
Shannon and Mercer Lane. So that's somebody like the two folks that I see is new to the space. Do you guys want to introduce yourself?
Oh, hi. Are you talking to me?
Yeah, we're just like introduced, like, so pretty much everybody here is like pretty much regulars, and you probably see them like on the calls like all the time. We like them, so they're enough speaking up. But so pretty much like we're just like talking to the people, the new folks who just joined the call, just to kind of give a little context for them, and like for librarians to be like, oh, how are you doing? All that fun stuff.
Okay. Sorry, I look like absolute trash right now.
You've seen. No, listen. You see me right now, so it's okay. Like you're looking great.
Fine.
No worries. Look
Oh
at
my
Victor
God.
just like laughing, like he said, like it's so true. Like he's like, oh my God, Lynn's
Hey
face.
Shannon, welcome to the public library.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I want to give a shout out to QZ. His Twitter handle is Fish Biscuit. He's the best. He was like, Shannon, you got to join Gitcoin Discord. And I was like, okay, what's it about? So I'm really excited to be here. And just from seeing the discussions on the different channels, I feel like this is the right place for me. I'm super passionate about a lot of things. So let me give you a brief background. TradFi, data science, fintech, and then I went down the rabbit hole for Web3 and started my own Women in Crypto community. And this is
language topic only, online topic only, and online shoppers. Then.
Oh, sorry. I thought someone was
Cosmo,
speaking.
are you on the train, Cosmo?
On the what?
Oh no, I just think was that sound coming from Cosmo?
Yeah, it was from somewhere else. But yeah, low key, I got published in a TechCrunch article for my Women in Crypto community, and then I'm also getting into the launch house for the Web3 residency in New York City. So that's super cool. That's about me.
What's the name of your community?
Sorry?
What's the name of your Women in Crypto community? I'm interested.
The Twitter handle is W3_crypto, and I just say we crypto. And we focus on onboarding women into crypto through education and news. So I read all the source material and then I summarize it and make it super easy to read. Whether it's the latest cryptocurrency news or crypto news, down to like DAOs, Web3, NFTs, crypto ABCs.
I'm in this space for like, I don't know, 3 months now, but I definitely need that onboarding. I feel like I don't know anything yet, so quite interesting. Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction. Mercer, I think you're new here too. Would you like to give an introduction?
Yeah. Hey y'all, I'm Mercer. I came to Gitcoin through I think a couple places all at once. I found Kernel through I want to say either the Gnosis Guild Discord or the Trust Discord or just on Twitter. But kind of came to all of these spaces all at once. So like this is I guess I've been kind of inactive on the internet for quite a while because Web 2 sucks and it was never really my vibe as far as like using Twitter or Facebook or any of those platforms. And but now recently I've been kind of just joining a bunch of Discords, getting involved in a couple of communities, and I haven't been this excited about being on the internet in like 15 years. So very cool communities all the way around. I like a lot of the stuff that's happening in Web3. I'm not a technical person. I don't come from the tech world. Most of my work over the last 10 years has been in the film industry. I'm a sound mixer for film and TV projects. And that's what I spend most of my time doing. And then also I'm pretty heavily involved in a tea house community here in Austin, which has kind of really set the stage for kind of a lot of my musings in the world of community organizing. I'm really both of them. I mean, film industry is a union labor scenario, but in Texas where I live, it's a right to work state, so a lot of it has to be done pretty grassroots. We can't really rely on the IATSE union too heavily to like do a lot of the work for us to organize all the folks who are doing crew work in Austin. So it's been a lot of just community organizing with that and with the tea house community, and that kind of got me really interested in DAOs and some of the possibilities of learning about decentralized communication and governance and cooperation. And so then what really got me to get into the Gitcoin Discord and DAO was I just recently found out about the greatest LARP. So then I really liked the whole ethos of coordination and the Molochs and stuff like that. That story resonated with me. So then I wanted to get involved.
Awesome. Join us in the librarian call next time. Maybe if you want to get involved more into the library space. But maybe today's call will kind of give you kind of context on like what on how we operate in general. So very excited for that. Sure. And then I see Irina. So pretty much we should get the conversation rolling. But Irina, if you want to give like a quick intro to yourself, and then we'll get started on the call because we're talking about redesigning the I need to not like say the wrong. We are redesigning the for human thriving, which sounds so crazy. I feel like there should be a college course on that. Anyway, yeah. So Irina, if you want to kind of give a quick intro, and then we'll get started on the call. Also for everybody, just give a little context. We are recording and uploading the stream. If you are not comfortable, that is something that you can also attend on the stream. Henry is streaming the call. So if you don't want to be on this space, feel free to opt out and listen through YouTube. So yeah.
Irina, maybe your mic is. Yeah, I see you're trying to.
It's okay, Irina. If you can like intro in the Public Goods Library channel, that would also be great. And then we can like bring it over to Simona. Actually, I'll let Scott kind of give you Simona an intro on what she's been doing.
Yeah, I mean, Simona doesn't. I feel like doesn't need a huge intro. Like Simona's been one of the I think OG community organizers in the space for the last few years, even pre this sort of last cycle that everyone's sort of been joining. Simona's been doing community organizing, in the space pretty actively since well before then, and has been a huge part of the Gitcoin community even since the start. In fact, originally when we were just doing bounties, the tooling that we were using for the actual smart contracts was built by Simona's team through Bounties Network. So it's actually kind of very fitting that we've come together and Simona's been a key steward in the DAO. And I will let the rest of the intro, I'll leave the rest of that to you, Simona.
Cool. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us here. Like Scott said, it feels like I've been in this space for 10,000 years, which is roughly 4 years in normal time. And seeing a lot of different things emerge and being able to build a lot of projects and a lot of, again, like Scott said, a lot of the infrastructure and really the building blocks for what I hope we all want to achieve, which is a much better dynamic than what we currently have with Web2 and just with the current kind of socioeconomic dynamics. So for a little bit more about me, very quickly, I am obviously a steward in Gitcoin and one of the top delegates in the DAO. I'm also going to be focusing on how we manage to create and maintain engagement when it comes to governance and make sure that it is a sustainable process versus the dynamic that we have right now, which is one DAO appears, everybody's excited, and then another one appears and everybody's like, oh, shiny, let's go there now. So figuring out those processes and figuring out how we are able to maintain engagement in governance, even when we get to hopefully tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of people, is a very, very timely and also a necessary endeavor. So I'm kind of looking at how we can create that, not just for Gitcoin, but obviously for the DAO space in general. I'm also part of the scholarship programs for, I head up the scholarships for ETH Denver and also for DevCon. And so I believe the ETH Denver ones are open now. So please feel free, and I can share a link so you can apply if anybody wants to travel over, or indeed know of people who would benefit from some sort of financial assistance to travel over to Denver, and then be able to access all of the events happening during Biddle Week. And a whole host of other, I guess, initiatives around onboarding and getting more people into the space. And I'm also a steward in Kernel as well. So it's great to see a lot of you here who are part of Kernel. But I want to, just so we don't kind of lose time on this, I want to essentially chat to you about redesigning for human thriving. It's very much something that I am and have always been interested in. And a lot of the work that I do is focused on how we recreate and redesign the current models so that they are a lot more inclusive and a lot more conducive to a dynamic of thriving versus our usual, I guess, Web 2 way or current way, which is very extractive and totally unsustainable. And so let me see if I can share this, and you guys let me know if you can see it. Yeah?
Yes,
Yes,
we can.
Yes. Okay. So empowerment versus power is essentially one of the things that, again, I'm super, super interested in, and seeing this shift between a dynamic of having power versus a dynamic of empowering others is something that I believe underpins what we're trying to do here with Web3. And a lot of you who have been in Kernel or are in Kernel now know that there is a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And hopefully we can build in a way that keeps this North Star in mind as we design and build and create all of these new ways of doing things. And so my belief is this is basically redesigning for human thriving. The shift is very simple, right? So empowering is giving that authority and agency to somebody to do something. And I think with Web3, what we're seeing is really a shift between this kind of passive way that we have been used to participating. It's a very top-down dynamic. It's a very, this is what you are given, therefore be happy with it. And it shifts it to a dynamic of empowering others and empowering ourselves to do what it is that we want to do, and hopefully to achieve what we want to achieve in a much, much more straightforward way. And when it comes to community, obviously communities, as we know, have had a big, big evolution, right? From a very, again, top-down, let's say, communication, a one-way communication, to this level where we are at a three-dimensional layer right now, or rather three-dimensional framework, where we have these communities that are 360-degree approaches of, we're not just cogs in a market, but we are actual full participants and have with agency in the processes that that essentially happen to us, with us, through us. And so it's definitely a shift, and it's definitely an evolution. And, you know, the fact that we're all here is proof of that. And the fact that we are looking at how we contribute to something like a DAO is very much testimony to that evolution, and just how powerful and empowering that evolution is. And so going from that to a very quick I guess, list of ingredients for human thriving, we basically have, again, a shift where we are not just changing the goals, because for so long, GDP and profit was always the end goal of everything and of all organizations and economies around the world, but also seeing a bigger picture, focusing on the long term, focusing on what the end goal is versus the short-term profit. And a lot of it has to do with nurturing human nature, of being smart with systems and being very much focused on sustainability and focused on, again, accessibility, which is completely different from what we have right now. And the reason why it's important to redesign is because we need to design to distribute. And it's very much what we are doing right now, I believe, or anyway, we're at the very beginning of what that looks like. But I think the more people come into the space and the more people get involved and think about these things, the better positioned we're going to be able to tackle these and actually really get it done. And creating to regenerate and being agnostic about growth and being pro-thriving versus mindless accumulation, I think is, hopefully the direction that we are moving towards with, not just the philosophy, but also the technical underpinning. And so I think a lot of you know this from economy. Obviously, it's been proven that it's not necessarily true, but I think for a lot of people, this still is this illusion that somehow, as income increases and as growth increases, the inequality is a necessary ingredient of that, and somehow at some point it levels out. That is clearly not true, because we get to this level where inequality isn't an economic necessity, it is a design failure. And if it is a design failure, you wouldn't, persist with it. You would try to correct it, or you would try to redesign it to make sure that it isn't flawed anymore. And a very simple, I guess, analogy here would be, if you had a car that broke down the amount of times that economies around the world break down, that car would be pulled off the market. You would not be able to buy it. You shouldn't be able to buy it, because it is clearly dangerous, and it is definitely not helping you thrive. So just keeping that in mind is important when you think about why we're all putting up with the current systems, just because they're there. It's time to change them and pull them off the market. This is a quote from Albert Nee. He had a really good talk at East London in 2020, right before the pandemic curbed all of our eventing, IRL eventing. But this was really, really powerful because, and I definitely feel that with everything that we are doing and everything that is, flourishing right now, and just pulling from what Scott said earlier, we were talking about a lot of these things back in 2017, 2018, and it's great to see that progression, and it's great to see the fact that things are actually evolving, because it is the first time in so long that we have so many parts of the stack accessible, and being able to work them or put them in the service of redesigning is an incredibly powerful thing. And I think we should definitely seize this moment. And so all of this to say, because we are all about open source, and because we are about public goods, and because we are thinking about how all of these essentially can shift the way we think about value and can shift the way we do things, there's this idea of open source circular economies, right? And this is a very quick and easy recipe, which obviously isn't that quick because it takes a minute to build all of these things. However, if we constantly keep these ingredients in mind, and when we build, we make sure that we do not cut corners, and we make sure that we don't, fall back into what is potentially comfortable or what can make us more cash as projects, will be in a very, very good place. And this is all about building mindfully, right? And building with all of these four tenants in mind, because at the end of the day, what you want is that accessibility, and you want to give everybody, regardless of their, geographic location, regardless of their socioeconomic status when that they are brought into, everything should be accessible and transparent, and easily, the parts should be easy to reassemble and rearrange based on specific needs or solutions. So of course, what this means is you have this network of flows and you're structuring the economy, which is again what we are seeing now with all of these different formats coming into existence, is this idea of more equitable distribution of not just income, but of value and of wealth, and what, the different trajectories that it can fall into. And of course, that leads us to a regenerative open source economy, and regenerative by design, because instead of what we have right now, and let's face it, we are constantly, in the real world, if you will, still we have this extract. And so, and I think we can all agree that's not sustainable. And rather than being focused on this mindless growth, we are instead focused on thriving and on resilience. There's a very interesting dynamic called this biomimicry, and it's also in nature, essentially, you have a very simple balance that just happens naturally, funnily enough, which is called the optimum balance point between diversity and efficiency. And in nature, if you leave it alone, it will always find its balance. But of course, because we always get involved, we always, as economies, and so far we've always focused on way too much efficiency and not enough diversity, which makes it brittle and again, not really sustainable. And this is the another analogy that I like to use when it comes to that balance. It's this dynamic between diversity and, diversity meaning resilience. And if you look at too much efficiency, let's say you have the panda who only eats one thing versus the gray squirrel who pretty much eats anything. And I think we can all agree that this population is much more in a thriving dynamic than the panda. But that's another just very simple analogy for us to understand why having that balance between diversity, potentially different kind of economic dynamics and models can actually do us a lot of good. And so what this gets us to, and again, because we are, very much this idea of, economies do imply finance. It's impossible to kind of think about it without them, but it becomes finance in the service of life and in the service of thriving. And it's about diversifying what we see as valuable, right? There's so many types of value. There's human, there's social, there's economical, cultural, physical, versus the be all and end all, which is what we have right now, which is the cash, right? And also the monetary monoculture that we are all in, which is, again, not a very good idea currently. And again, what we're seeing with Web3 is this diversification of how we interpret value, what we value, and how that value flows. And also through all of these different token economic designs that we're seeing around the ecosystem, we're really starting to play with these interesting complementary currencies that essentially, again, potentially make it a much more diverse, therefore a much more resilient economic dynamic. And then, of course, redesigning those currencies, as we are very much doing in Web3, versus just the money flows, which is pretty much what every time there's a crisis, we just kind of go, oh yeah, let's shift the money flow a little bit, but we always end up in the same place. And a very quick example, just because we are seeing so many tokens pop up, and obviously not all of them are good, and obviously there's a lot of scams, but the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because complementary currencies are not new. They have been tested out before, but they were always tested without the technology. The technology was not available to make these things a viable or even an efficient way of doing things. And just two examples here very quickly. You have the Swiss weir, which was created in the 30s. And it was initially a small group of businessmen in Switzerland who basically all agreed that in order to trade with each other, if they didn't have any francs, they would use this currency that they made up, because let's remember, all money is made up, and they would be able to spend that instead of francs, which meant that, of course, the franc was kept for taxes, but they were able to trade with each other using this weir. They agreed that 1 weir would be 1 Swiss franc, and that's all anything is. It's just a convention that we all agree has value. And so this has had, almost 90 years of successful experience. And there's a lot of studies that are basically saying that the reason for, and of course, there are many reasons, but one of the reasons for, Switzerland's, let's say, balanced and a very thriving economy is because of this dual currency that has existed for businesses for so long, and now they've made it into a bank and everything, and of course, as the Swiss would. And the other example that I want to bring to your attention is this Turquoise, which was an experiment in Belgium that basically was focused on this neighborhood in Belgium that was really not doing great in terms of just crime and, relationships between people living there and so on. So the experiment was essentially to create this token, this alternative token, to reward people for doing things in the community, right? So very much what we are looking at and very much what we are, thinking about in Web3 is how can we have these systems of reward and incentives potentially to essentially incentivize people to do these things. Again, 1 Torque was agreed that it was 10 cents. It was all paper, of course. And the results of that experiment, I think it went on for, I can't remember exactly now, maybe 6 months, but it was not just a shift in the thriving of that particular district, but it was also a really, really interesting token economics experiment around what incentives could do, and also what a complementary currency, the effects it could have on the let's say the money situation of a lot of the inhabitants, because again, they could keep this the euros to pay taxes, and then they could use the torques to essentially use within the district. I think their shops accepted it, and cinemas, and a few restaurants and things like that. So very, very interesting dynamics. And again, complementary currencies and diversifying value is not new. It's just now we have the tech to do it, which is, again, very, very exciting. And this was a really funny meme when, I can't remember when this was, but essentially, the whole, in economics, you have this Homo economicus who's always selfish and interested in gain and extracting as much as he possibly can, to this idea of what and where we're heading towards, where we value a lot more than just the cash. We value a lot more around long-term goals. We value being part of a community. We value bringing value in, and how that value flows. So it's a really, really interesting shift that I hope, obviously, we get to achieve. And again, hopefully, we all get to achieve it together, because again, we have a very creative medium at our disposal. And I think as long as we can just imagine the right stuff and build mindfully, I think we can definitely get to that point where we are building those dynamics for human thriving, versus just continuing as business as usual, which should definitely not be the case. And I think that's it.
That was really wonderful. Thank you for doing that whole presentation. That's very novel. That's not something we've really had in this group before, and I think it was very constructive to have something that guided us through the thinking. So I really appreciate you doing that. I just want to say that up front.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So there's a couple things that you brought up that I'd love to open up for discussion here. So one of the things that I think is an interesting theme here is how to shift that mindset away from the efficiency economy and optimization and into diversity, right? So I think that nature probably exists somewhere between efficiency and diversity. There's, when you have asymmetries, that's sort of when you get this like frothy state, and that's where you see growth. Growth comes from the opportunity that lies between diversity and efficiency. It's interesting to use the examples that you pointed out of the Vir and the Turek. Is it the Tureke? Is that what you said? How you pronounce that?
Yeah, it means
Tureke.
Yeah.
Okay. That those are agreement economies, right? That you're like, we agree upon the value here. We create an economy on mutually ascribed value, based entirely on the fact that the environment that this is needed for is in a state of flux where there is imbalance, and you are in this frothy state that allows for growth. So I suppose what I want to open up here is this question of optimization, right? Like, do we necessarily think that maybe that's the core problem with extractive capitalism as it's seen in our current state of economy, and what do we think about the efficiencies and how we move away from the mindset of efficiency into recognizing that while diversity does take a long time to produce growth, you kind of do need to live somewhere in the middle between efficiency and diverse growth state.
I mean, just quickly, and everybody feel free to jump in. I think that's essentially what I was trying to illustrate with the balance in nature, right? Because it is incredibly interesting when you have the two states, the fact that balance is a natural thing, and the fact that when we get involved, and so far, whenever we've gotten involved, we go straight into extreme efficiency. We don't just nudge a little bit. We just go, it's, completely, think we always go to austerity, right? So you go completely the other way, completely bypassing any kind of balance. And so what that does is it causes this structural instability, because you're pushing way too far into the other direction,
Right,
versus trying to go to the middle, right? Or try to go between efficiency and resilience, between diversity and efficiency.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too to think about how there is the local need for efficiency for the growth and maintenance of, like, let's say, a population or something along those lines. And then the counterpoint of this is that particular group, that species, let's call it, right, needs to be able to exist alongside other things. It needs to be optimized for its own survival, but also not so optimized that it takes over the entirety of a system. And so that's maybe the mind shift that we're looking at here. So I saw some other people. I saw Victor. You seemed like you were about to say something. Did you want to go ahead and take the floor?
Yes, I want to say. So thank you, Simona, for the presentation. But in order for people to thrive, I think like we also have to create an environment for that. So, for example, like when the pandemic happens, only people who has like access to a stimulus package or have other benefits when they were out of job, they had the opportunity to really see what is happening, like what is for opportunity within crypto, or maybe like educating themselves to relearn and growing the mindset. But people who's coming to an environment where they don't have support when their business is shut down, or they, for example, has a very scarce mindset, it is very difficult for them to thrive, especially when in a time where people are very, let's say, sensible, thinking a lot of the negativity, what is happening in the world. So how can we help people to adjust?
This is what we're doing here, right? So my whole spiel, if you will, is that this is what Web3 is attempting to do. It's obviously not built yet, because we're in the process of building it. And it's obviously not going to happen overnight, because these are complex things that we're building. But I feel that this is what we are building towards, or we should be building towards, and creating that environment that you mentioned to be able to shift that gear from what we have right now to what could be, and what could be a lot better. And so, no, the environment isn't built yet, because we're in the process of building it. And everyone who comes into Web3 is hopefully joining that same kind of goal, regardless of whether they're doing a very specific thing like pizza now. And by the way, I did buy those. I think I have 3 pizza boxes. But it's very important. It's very important to essentially create this alternative. And yes, it requires a big shift in mindset. In fact, I think on some kernel fireside, I called it the great unlearning. You really need to go out of what you know right now in order to see what can be. It's hard.
I think there's something very intriguing here that's also maybe a core underlying appreciation that needs to come together, is like a lot of the way that we approach problem solving in our society up until recently has been fairly binary, right? Like you either look at one side of a solution as being extractive, or being completely, like you have the sort of the difference between like, oh, you have extractive capitalism or you have socialism, as like some people like to categorize it that way, and so it becomes this polarized sort of thing. You're at either one of the poles. Well, what's interesting about Web3 is the fact that it is a sorting event, and it seems to be. I say this a lot of the time. That Web3 seems to be all the dissidents who didn't agree with the other systems. And the reason that we are the dissidents is because a lot of the times, like the definitions and it necessarily sometimes those binaries don't necessarily fit within how it is that we see our conception of the world. And so what's going to be very interesting is watching this economy as Ben mentioned in the chat alongside this meeting, we're going to be taking the green pill, sort of like understanding that there is not necessarily one or another choice, but there is somewhere in the middle of those two things, something that is a collusive, not a collusive, a collaborative sort of place to land. But it is going to take a lot more energy. It's a lot more work, and it requires a ton more of that consciousness shift. And that's probably the biggest part of it.
It is, and this is why, get ready to unlearn a lot of shit that has been peddled for a very long time. And we've and again, for so long, it's just this is the status quo. This is what it is,
I want to point something out here that I think is really interesting too. The Web3 community, for some reason, seems to ostracize a lot of the LGBTQ community, and there is actually a little bit of ostracization of like people from minority backgrounds as well. We're seeing a shift in that. It's changing a little bit, but it's interesting because a lot of that unlearning comes naturally to those who are already marginalized, right? So it's when you come from a community that has not had to do that unlearning just as a part of existing, it's a lot harder to do. So that's why we use these terms of it being difficult. Yes, thank you, Gamma. It's like when you come from a community where you have to do this quote unquote hard work of unlearning, it gets seen as hard work. But if you're queer, like I'm queer, or if you're from a minority background, and there are a number of minority background people in here, we've actually had to do a lot of that work up front, because we already don't fit into the binaries in general. And so I think one of the very constructive elements to sort of back ourselves up against, or to use this as a support, is the recognition that if we're talking about this diversity element, it needs to be specifically leaning on the fact that diversity is a constructive element, and that it provides substrate for us to be able to build up everything with in being able to account for the fact that we have to build a new mode of thinking that moves away from binaries. And I would love to hear from some other people in the room as well. Just maybe like Henry, it looks like you're about to say something, and anyone else who wants to speak as well. And if you don't have anything to add, that's also okay. We can just it feels like there's a lot we're ruminating on here. So, Joe, did you want to say something?
If Henry's not there, I really appreciate the way Simona framed it. And I think one of the ways we need to look at complex systems is in the finite versus infinite game model. And if you're in the infinite game, you need evolutionary systems, which is why you need diversity, is because with the resources you have, you're trying to maximize the number of different experiments that happen to find a successful outcome. And then you put more resources towards that one. And that's something that is diversity, trying different things, allowing different things. And so, the diversity that comes from, different classes of people, and however you want to divide different people is going to be infinitely smaller than the diversity you get in just creative solutions that bringing different people together are going to come up with, because people come up with wild ways to solve problems. And the more you're going for efficiency, you're basically telling people a lot of times in this very finite way, we need a solution quickly. So here are the things we know that work, stay within these rails. And that's not going to provide a level of diversity. But I also find it's very interesting to think that, we talk about inclusion in like in the way we talked about decentralization back in 2017, where people would say decentralization, almost became this thing where it was like, if you say that without specifying what decentralization, it kind of was like an indicator that you really didn't know exactly what you were talking about, because there's a political decentralization, the architectural decentralization, and those people who had less than stellar ethics were using that ambiguity to run scams and so forth. But the inclusion that we're looking for here is really interesting, because like we're trying to strengthen our culture while being inclusive. So like, what does that mean to be inclusive with like our culture? Well, our culture is those things that we have like shared belief in, and we hold stake in these ideas together. And it's almost like we hold stake in like GTC and this DAO together because of those ideas. So it's inclusivity, bringing anybody from any race, gender, culture, background into this group, and assimilating that, or is culture by nature an exclusive thing, where what we're actually saying is those different ways that we used to divide people, we need to burn that idea down, because we're looking for diversity and creating different solutions. We don't care where it comes from and who it comes from, but we are looking for to be exclusive to those who don't share our ideals and goals and our just cause, our mission. And if we recognize that the world that we're in doesn't provide enough opportunities for certain classes, genders, racial backgrounds, and so forth, that for us to be optimal in the infinite game, and to find that balance from efficiency to diversity, we need to go out there and include those people intentionally and actively, because the random lottery of just running into somebody isn't going to provide them in the world that we're currently in. But if we want that diversity of ideas and thoughts, we need to go out there and be exclusive, no matter what the person's race, gender, whatever it is. If they don't match our ideals, but we're all going to make it together, and we're going to go out there and actively look for those contributors who maybe wouldn't stumble upon us. Go and find them if they are part of our culture. They believe that we can make this world better.
The really cool part to me about this is like that with every currency that we create, we're kind of creating something that aligns with like our shared values. And I think this was actually touched on in the talk that Lonnie did with the Penvala crew on Monday, which was like, we are effectively creating like microeconomies, and the ability to like, create these economies comes with this baggage of like, oh, economies are like going to create this hyper capitalist, very like financialized, like there's like risks of those things because we're so used to like economics being used as a tool in a certain way. But I think there's a method by which we can actually start to like look at like other more cooperative or like local economic systems. Like Simona, you mentioned some like kind of like adjacent examples to this in the presentation that I think are much more kind of relevant to like the kinds of tools that we want to see in the world like down the road. And it's kind of like, if we look at the idea of a corporation or a nation state, historically we just thought, oh, those are like the organizational structures that can exist. And like we even still think that today, like people, when they think of creating a company, they think of creating a LLC or like C Corp. They don't think of creating like a cooperative because it's really complicated to do these other models. But as we start to create new currencies, we can do that.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I mean when I say diversity in all things, right? So it's about shifting from that dynamic that, again, we've been used to for so long, that is so obsessed with streamlining and in excess, bringing it towards the diversity and interconnectivity, which is exactly, again, what you have in nature. And this is where, if you look at complex systems in nature, they all have that window of viability, which is that balance between diversity and interconnectivity with some sort of streamlining element. And it's a very hard thing to, mimic or try to recreate or try to bring into what we do, because again, we have had for so many decades this legacy of this is the way things are, this is the way it is, this is the way it's structured, this is what we do when, we have yet another economic crisis, which again is simply a sign of just structural instability. Which again, if you had a car, you would pull it off the market if it broke down, as often as current economies do.
I want to offer the floor maybe to Gama and then maybe Irina. I saw Gama, you were going to say something a second ago.
Yeah, okay. That sounds like ages ago, but I think a solution that might come to solve like the diversity thing is that what a lot we're seeing in Web2 is like the build for, and I think what we're trying to do with regeneration is build together, and like not only including, but like having this diversity as a whole inherent part of the process, because otherwise it cannot happen. And one thing I also wanted to add, since we were directly speaking about token economies, I wanted to bring a like non-global north reference, maybe for Simona, which is a local currency in Mexico called Tumin. Is there a chat where I can drop this link?
Yeah, that'd be great. Actually,
You can drop it in the weekly call chat. And actually, I just want to throw out there a lovely discussion. I have a hard stop. I have to jump off. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much, Simona, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for showing up.
Awesome. I can take over. Just like to
thank you, Scott.
For anyone that wants to stay over. The next sort of like big piece to me is like maybe just to like get some conversations from. I know a few people have had a chance to talk, but I know we have a lot of other folks in the chat. So just want to like give anyone who hasn't spoken a chance maybe to jump in on any of the points that are being mentioned.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Earlier we were discussing having representation for LGBTQ community in the Web3 space. As a bi person, I don't really talk about my sexuality on any of my social medias, but from what I've seen in the Web3 communities, there has been a lot of inclusion. So I was wondering if anyone has witnessed any like any pushback towards the LGBTQ community, because I personally haven't seen it, but maybe that's just my limited experience.
I think, and I would love anyone else to jump in on this too. It's very much like a culture shift that's happened in the last couple of years. So I've been in the space since like 2016, and I think, for better or for worse, like I have nothing against like, for example, Bitcoin as a thing, but I think like the Bitcoin community has like a very different culture which shaped a lot of the early crypto culture, and it tends to be, in my opinion, very biased opinion, like less like kind of inclusive. So I think over the last like 2-3 years, it's become much better. But before that, like I think it was much more common. Folks like Dame, for example, on Twitter, very active, very like core personalities to the space now. Whereas like 2-3 years ago, yeah, that definitely wasn't as true.
What I have experienced is like externally, a lot of people like I mean, everyone talks about it, but like internally, like dealing with people's in group of people, especially in DAOs, which like can be a lot of like kind of a bit of toxic masculinity. It sometimes a bit different, just difficult just to stand out, like being a queer, but and not all spaces, but I have experienced it. Yeah.
Thank you guys for your input. That makes a lot of sense. I've been in the Web3 space for the past few months, and so I probably wasn't aware of like the early Bitcoin days. And yeah, I really appreciate your feedback.
I think Ethereum tends to be a lot more open as well. And like Scott says, there's a real, I guess, just a really, really welcoming and very, very inclusive vibe, certainly in the communities that I'm part of, which is great to see. And we obviously always should be mindful. And again, we come back to mindfulness, right? And I think there's so much of that to make sure that we don't regress and we don't go back to the way those or some forums have been, or certain situations have presented themselves. I think it's important to just constantly make sure that we just do better and more, and become that, again, just that space where that's incredibly welcoming. And I think we're on the right track.
Yeah, I agree. Ethereum
Definitely.
has been super welcoming. I love that.
Yeah, Simona, I love what you're speaking about, the relationship between the diversity that's unfolding in Web3 and witnessing biodiversity in nature. And I feel like, especially in the Ethereum ecosystem, this is becoming more and more present. This an appreciation of diversity is what gives us strength, right? Rather than in the old model that was more binary, segregationist, and keeping us in our separate ways, like understanding that, what brings us strength is all of our differences coming together in collaboration and coordination, as we like to say. And especially this community, I feel like, is very welcoming of difference. And, like anyone that's been here knows that there is a diversity, I don't want to call it a problem, right? Like that there is a lacking diversity, but that everyone that I am working with is very conscious of it and speaking about it openly and having very real conversations about it on a regular basis and very proactively working to transform that reality. So, we're not there yet, but I do believe that we will evolve in that direction and continue to do so.
100%. And I think this is the big bit with making sure that whenever and whatever it is that we're doing or creating is done in a mindful way. So for instance, I co-organized LizCon in Lisbon, when was it? Last month. And it was very important to me as a content curator to make sure that there is representation across the board on the agenda across the 2 days. And that meant, interesting conversations with a lot of people saying, I would like to hear from somebody else on your project. Or, I don't want to have, in fact, I had one male MC out of 5, or identifying as male. And it's incredibly important to keep doing that and keeping those things in check until we reach that balance point where you don't need to, be as, I don't want to say as active, because obviously that's key, but you don't it doesn't have to be a struggle, right? So it shouldn't have me talking to people in different projects saying, I'm pretty sure you have other representatives who could speak on stage, and maybe they should get that airtime. Right? So I think the more we do this, the better place will be. And also, we'll hopefully get to that balance. It's so interesting that it's just naturally there, yet we have had such trouble finding it.
Yeah, Penn has spoken, who's no longer with us, but Penn's spoken to this quite a bit of the relationship between pseudonymity and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how to navigate the relationship between those two spaces, which is sort of like a unique challenge in our reality. But I feel like, at least I will say, yeah, everyone that I'm collaborating with here is working in good faith to create the world that better reflects the truth of like who and what we are as this diverse symbiotic ecosystem.
Yeah, there's something I want to add. So I think like especially we have to work on that. Web3 should make sure that it's very easy to get involved. I mean, like if we see like how the tooling are working on Web3, for example, like how easy it is nowadays to create NFTs, and especially when you're expressing your art, it's make it much more easy for people to expand themselves, which Web2 and some other tools does not provide. And especially with the social construct that we have, I think like that's why the open web makes it much more easier, and we just have to work that the technology is working for humans than the opposite.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think like this is one of the most frequent conversations that's coming up in my circles is usability onboarding process. Like Chris, I don't know if Chris is here. I don't think so. Chris has been working so hard on Gitcoin and Lowy on Gitcoin's onboarding process and trying to make it as easy as possible for anyone that wants to participate to have like clear pathways to do so. You know, it's early and everyone's figuring it out as they go. And yeah, I absolutely think this is one of the most pressing situations because what you said earlier, you know, like not everyone has the luxury and freedom of time and money to learn about these things and explore and poke around and figure out what's what in order to participate. And I think like the more we place our attention on making it easy and clear of how to enter if you're interested in doing so, that's like one of our most worthwhile endeavors.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I'll share a couple of links in the weekly call channel as well, so you guys can see some of the stuff that we were doing in that vein. And I think, you know, a lot more. And I sometimes get frustrated with the fact that we, at times, as an ecosystem, lose focus on what really matters. But ultimately, you know, if we constantly again, just continue working towards that thriving for everybody and accessibility for everybody. I think we're gonna make it. We're gonna WAGMI. But also, I like as a variation on WAGMI, I like to say, and it's Jonathan, a friend from Colorado, who said this first. It was WAGMIT, which is we're all gonna make it together. Is the
Yay.
That's great.
What I've been saying to people a little bit lately is another way of thinking about WAGMI is that the world is really broken and we are the tail and it is calling out to us, WAGMI.
Love it. Yeah.
Okay.
Amazing.
So I know Gary was trying to jump in. I don't know if Gary, your mic is a bit better now. I just saw that in chat. Give you a second, but maybe not. And then Gamma, I saw maybe you were going to jump in. Wanted to give you a second there.
Hey, what role do I need to see the weekly discussion channel? Sorry, I cannot see it. It changed up quite a bit, and I cannot see it.
You should be able to see it just in the main.
Okay, I see it now. Yeah, thanks. Awesome.
Can you hear me now?
That's great.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, awesome. First of all, this was awesome discussion. Simona, this is great. And everyone that chimed in, really just couldn't agree more. I think the kind of balance between efficiency and really all these things that are undervalued, including diversity, is a big issue. Just have a couple things to contribute from like a lot of experience trying to build a digital first community that kind of reflects like all the ingredients of flourishing and forward progress. I think who funds your work is super important. It wasn't easy, especially like it still isn't easy, but it definitely wasn't easy before, like convincing the donor type people who are typically like bankers and lawyers to allow for us to experiment and innovate, to give money to young people, like high schoolers, to work on projects that will probably fail, and just like try crazy things, like try to build a DAO, which we're launching right now. So, I mean, I think why Gitcoin is such a really important, Web3 institution is because of the culture that it spreads, and also, quite frankly, because it seems like if you're going to take money from anyone, you're going to want to take it from funders whose values are very much aligned with yours. And so the fact that Gitcoin is the place where we're having this discussion is a really good sign to me.
Absolutely. I actually wonder, for those who are newer to Web3, like, by the way, like one point that came up earlier is just the like pace of information and like how hard it is to like keep up with everything going on. Like, how have people who are newer like found that experience? Like, what do you like? Do you feel like it's overwhelming from like what you've seen so far? Like, maybe, I mean, I don't know if Bianca is still here, but I feel like Bianca, you're pretty new space. Like, has it been? Is like, what can we do to like better curate that information?
I think it first starts in language because even the jargon we use alone can be pretty exclusionary and can intimidate others. They may feel like they're not smart enough or not, I guess, don't fit the vibe enough to join in the conversation. So if we want to, I guess, open up this space up to more people, I think that's one thing we should definitely think about. Like, the role of a translator, I guess, is so important. Not just in terms of like literal translation, but I guess like translating like culture. So what does this mean for me? Why is this important to me? Why should I care about this? Yeah.
I think
like that's a really great point. Snapping, but I don't have my video on.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I caught half of that and then my Discord crashed. But I definitely think that like this is a conversation that we should have more. I guess like just a note that we're about 15 minutes over on time, so just want to be mindful of Simona's time as well. But are there any other last questions or like threads that we want to pull on?
I just wanted to add how much I love the prompts in this conversation and the focus on biomimicry and so many other super important ideas. I think you just gave us a lot to chew on, Simona. I think this is great. Thanks.
Oh, hey, Ben. Good. I'm glad. And like Scott says, it's probably a conversation that we could just fill so much time with. But it's also such an interesting dynamic. And you and I also discussed this the other day. It's just so interesting that, again, we have the technology to potentially be able to support these explorations, right? And I think, again, it's an opportunity that we shouldn't miss at this point. And it's not that, it's not that the train is leaving the station, but I think it's important to get as many different perspectives into what we're doing on board so that, again, we do genuinely build better systems versus, same old, but in a corner of the internet. So.
I'm into that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Simona. This was great.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, feel free to. I dropped a couple of links just in a weekly call, and anybody else, if you have anything else to share, I am here, and feel free to reach out in DMs and so on. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Simona.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Really sparked amazing conversation. Looking forward to next week.
Awesome.
Thank you. Looking forward to next week.
Bye, everyone, and happy holidays if you're celebrating. See you.
Thanks so much.
Nice to join. Thanks for welcoming